I've told quite a few stories in my past. Let's talk about it a little bit. Hey Dragonlings, my name is Skye. I'm a fantasy author who typically writes paranormal romance under the name SD Hegyes. If you were around last week, I talked about all of the pen names that I write under, whether that's in the past, currently using, or ones I will be working with in the future. This week I want to talk about two of those pen names, both of which are retired, and what stories were published under them. Some of these stories are just done forever. I'm not going to be doing anything with them, whereas some of them will be making a comeback in the future. So let's go ahead and get down and dirty and talk about them. If you're interested in learning more about all of my pen names and what projects will be written under them, feel free to subscribe to this channel. And now let's go ahead and talk about two of those retired pen names. The first project I want to talk about was a horror fantasy short story called Chiller. This was based entirely off of a dream, and it probably never should have seen the light of day as far as publication goes. However, I wanted to learn more about the publishing process and how to upload books to Amazon. So I went ahead and designed my own cover. It was horrible, but I did it. And then I also uploaded it to Amazon as an ebook, never was a paperback, and just let it go. It is no longer available, but it is also the basis of what is now a 4-book series that I will talk about in a future video. So I will be returning to this short story, just not in the same way. A lot has changed since the original story was drafted, and while the core theme of the story is still alive in the new 4-book series, the events that happen and how they occur is completely different. More to come on that in the future, but for now it is gone from the world and will not be returning. The second one I want to talk about was a collection of short stories called Short Story Smash. This was entirely based on a writing experiment I did in 2010, where I wanted to write 52 short stories, one short story each week. I did not have a genre or theme that I wanted to follow. I did not have any word count expectations that I wanted to follow. So it is a hodgepodge mess of short stories, and actually it is only 51 short stories because one of them is a poem or a lullaby that I wrote the week that my daughter was born, my oldest was born. Again, it is no longer published. It is gone from the world completely. However, I do have a copy of it with the original cover. This was a cover that I designed for it, and as you can see, it's a very short, simple, thin book. Not much to it. Will these stories be coming back in the future? Will I republish this? No, probably not. Because of the fact that I didn't have any genre expectations or word count expectations, I have some short stories that were shorter than flash fiction. They were less than 100 words, while others were onwards up to about anywhere between 3,000 and 5,000 words. However, none of them exceeded 5,000 words. I don't even think any of them were 5,000 words. But the genres were all over the place as far as like contemporary, fantasy, horror, anything went. Will I do this writing experiment in the future? Possibly. I actually do have some intentions to do another short story writing experiment where I write a short story a week. However, if I do that, it will follow a specific theme so that I can do a bound copy in the future that is all the same theme or all the same genre at least. This particular one will not be published again. However, the idea and the story will possibly see the light of day again. The next project I want to talk about was called Days of Stars. This was a poetry collection that I wrote in high school and decided to publish because I have no idea why. I am not a particular fan of poetry. I'm not even certain why I decided to take all the poetry that I wrote that was also very, 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 very bad and publish it. I don't know what went through my brain, and I am actually very thankful I don't have a copy of that. The cover was very pretty, but I have no desire to look back on the poetry I wrote in high school because I know it was very bad, and I just don't want to read it. I don't want to see it. So if you got a copy, congrats! The next two projects I'm going to talk about together because they were part of a series, and that is Puck's Choice and Jenna's Story. This is book 1 and book 2 of the Shifters and Mages series. It was part of a 5-book collection that were under contract with a small publishing company. However, shortly after the second book was published, I got news that the publishing company was closing, and I received my rights back to both of these books. I haven't really touched them since. That being said, book 1, Puck's Choice, is going to be republished this year, December 3rd, 2024. So keep an eye out for that, because I hope to have a pre-order link coming soon. But as far as what's happening with them, there has been a few changes to the first book. The second book is currently with an editor to see what we're supposed to be going to be changing, and I do not have a publication date for the second book yet, nor any other books in the series. More details will be coming about this when I do the video about the pen name they're going to be coming out under, because they will no longer be under Skye Hegyes when they do get republished. So more details to come, not currently there yet. The next project I want to talk about was called The Longest Night Watch Volume 2. This was an anthology. It was the second volume in a series, and profits for this anthology went to Alzheimer's Association. The short story I submitted was called Sneeze, which was about a blacksmith allergic to magic who discovered that they were magic themselves, basically. This is one of the few projects that is still available for purchase, both as a paperback and an ebook. I have the ebook version. I plan on eventually purchasing a paperback before they pull it, just so that I have a physical copy that I can look at if I want to. But as far as the short story goes, will it be republished? Probably not. But at the same time, I have delved more into the world that story takes place. So there's always a possibility I will return to it, maybe in a collection of short stories that fall into that world. I haven't decided yet. It is up in limbo at the moment. But since it's still published, I'm not that worried about it. The next project I want to talk about was an anthology called Myths, Untold, Faery. The original idea was that we were going to have different themes that were going to fall under Myths, Untold. It was with a small press. I was actually approached by one of the authors that partook in the anthology to be a part of it, and I was super excited about it. There was 4 of us total, and my story was called Changeling, which was more of a coming of age. It was definitely a lot more on the sweeter side than the other authors' projects. And what Changeling was about was a young man who found out that he was a changeling, and he had to decide if he was going to stay in the mortal realm or go to Faery. I was a little sad with this one, actually, because when it was published, part of our contract was that we were supposed to get author copies, and while the other 3 authors did get their author copies, I never did. I contacted the company about it several times and kept getting told the same thing. It's coming, it's not there yet, but it's coming. And in the end, the other 3 authors who got theirs did so because they showed up at an event that the publishing house was also at. That was in California, and I was in North Carolina. That was not going to happen at the time. There was no way I was getting to California. So I never did receive my author copy, which makes me extremely sad. Since then, the publishing house has closed, and the project and story are no longer available. This is another one where I haven't decided if I'm going to republish it in the future. I haven't. I'm not going to go as far as to say that I'm bitter about the fact I never received my author copy, so I don't have a physical copy of it. But at the same time, it was one of those cases where I'm like, you had a legal obligation and they didn't fulfill it. So I haven't decided if the story is going to be one that gets republished. If it does, it's probably going to be extended and reworked and come out as a completely different story in the long run. The last published project was called Pride Park. This was also an anthology that was a charity anthology. This one was revolving around the Trevor Project. So all donations, all royalties go to the Trevor Project, which was something I was really happy to be a part of. My short story at the time, it was actually a poem. It was called Confessions of a Possibly Trans Child's Mother, because at the time my youngest was questioning a lot of stuff about themselves, and there was lots of questions in my lives as I was learning more about the trans community on whether or not my youngest would join said community, and to this day I'm still not certain, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. This was the last book that was published under Skye Hegyes. This was the last short story that was published under Skye Hegyes. However, there was a mix-up in the documentation, and while the documentation I submitted all said Skye Hegyes, for some odd reason that I still don't have any idea how it happened, probably because my emails were all signed a different way, because this was about the same time that I was making the transition to the pen name SD Hegyes. For some reason, on all of like Goodreads and Amazon, it shows up under SD Hegyes instead of Skye Hegyes. I guess in some ways, while it was supposed to be the last publication of Skye Hegyes, it became instead the first publication of SD Hegyes. However, in my mind, it's still, because it was supposed to be under Skye Hegyes, that's where I associated it. This is a Skye Hegyes work, not a SD Hegyes work. I don't know what happened. No one can explain it to me. In the long run, it doesn't really matter because this was many years ago. And while I think this is still available to purchase, I don't physically have a copy of it, so I don't have to see what they actually printed in the post, in the final form of it. So, c'est la vie. The last two projects I want to talk about never saw publication. One of them has been in limbo for so long I never even got a reply as to what happened. The first of these two is The Longest Night Watch, Volume 3. This was another anthology following the series that was The Longest Night Watch, and profits were going to go towards Alzheimer's Association. However, I know that the organizers of the anthology were having some health issues, and that affected a lot of what was going on. And this just never came to be. It was in the process of being formatted, like final edits had been done to all of the short stories, everything had been submitted back to the organizers, and all that had to happen was formatting and publication. However, that just never happened. And many years later, I am just going to assume it never is going to. So the story I submitted for that was called Serpent's Shadow. This did fall into the same world as the short story that was in volume 2, which was Sneeze. And what Serpent's Shadow was about was a member of a ship's crew bonding with a sea serpent. And I just thought that was a fun idea. Will this story come out? Again, I have delved into this world under a different pen name, so these stories might come out in the future in a collection of short stories that just revolve in the same world. However, I haven't fully decided if I'm going to go that route, or if I do, how these stories will make an appearance, if they ever do make an appearance. So more to come in the future maybe, but nothing right now. And then the last project that was never published, that was supposed to be under Skye Hegyes, was for an anthology called Carpe Noctem, Truly, Madly, Deeply. I fell in love with the cover of this book more than anything else, and this is why it makes me really sad, because I wanted this cover on my shelf. I was like, if I don't get any other anthology in a physical form, this is the one I want, because this cover was absolutely stunning. It was perfection. And what happened was that my story was accepted, and again, it was in the final formats after edits were done, and then just nothing. The creators of the anthology, they had already put out multiple other anthologies for the different states. They were supposed to be more of a horror anthology publishing company, and then this one was supposed to be like horror, fantasy, romance. And yeah, it went radio silent. The creators sent out a couple emails talking about the fact that they were having some problems with the company. They didn't go into great detail about what those problems were, and then there was nothing for more than 3 years. So even with me emailing them and saying, hey, can we get a status update? There was absolutely nothing. And now even the website of the publishing company is just gone. So I don't know what happened. They ghosted everyone. They ghosted everyone. So the story I was going to submit to them that they had accepted was called Sunrise Sunset, which was about a servant who meets a winged humanoid creature while being forced to face her fear of heights on the roof of a castle. I had a lot of fun writing that one, and that one's in kind of like the other two, Sneeze and Shadow Serpent. It is part of a larger world, and so this one may see the light of day again. However, it's a different world than those two stories. It's two different fantasy universes. And while I do have story ideas for other books in the world that Sunrise Sunset takes part in, I haven't decided if this particular short story is going to make a comeback. I don't have to decide that right now. So that's all the projects that were listed under Skye Hegyes. Now we're going to talk about the other retired pen name, which had a lot less stories. Myrna Hart was a erotica author pen name, and it was one of the ones that I got trashed for because at the time I was ghostwriting erotica shorts for multiple different people on Fiverr, and I was just getting burnt out of writing erotica. So it turned out that my erotica wasn't quite up to the standards of what erotica readers wanted. In fact, actually the reviews trashing it said that it was more paranormal romance than erotica. I am not certain if you can even find any of these stories still listed on Amazon or not. Because they were only available in ebook, I think they are completely gone. I do not know for certain. So you're welcome to look if you want to, but if they are still there, I know that I pulled them from publication. I don't even think they're listed there as currently unavailable is what I'm getting at. The first one of those was called Endless Embers. This was about a young man who's basically got a boring life, and he meets a young woman who is exciting and fun, except for she can start fires. And I don't mean she lights a match and lets it go. She's a fire starter. That is her supernatural ability. And it was about their one night together before she burned his apartment down, basically. Will those be coming out in the future? Probably not. But again, if it does, it will be under another pen name, and it'll be definitely written more as a paranormal romance story versus a erotica story. The next one was called Not Your Average Fairy Tale. This was about a princess who was in an arranged marriage with an abusive butthead and a dragon who's trying to renew the treaty that's between dragons and humans, and he gets caught up in the middle of it and has to save the princess basically. This one will probably be making a comeback but under a different name, and it will be extended. The plot will be the same, but I do want to write a completely different story. I do have some ideas for this moving forward. I just haven't quite finished formulating them, so I don't know how and when it'll be republished. And again, it'll be a completely different story because all of the Myrna Heart stories were like short stories that were less than 10,000 words. That was the whole point of Myrna Heart stories, was that they were very quick reads. The last of the Myrna Heart stories is called Heart of the Soulless, and this was about a witch who was one of 3 sisters, and while the 2 of the sisters were very much into destructive magic and destroying people's lives and wreaking havoc, they were basically the evil witches. She was more of a witch that was into healing and herbs and stuff. It created some tension between her and her sisters, especially when she found a young man and brought him home with her, and he had some qualities about him that made him dangerous to all 3 of them. And it was about the bond that she discovered that was between her and this particular man. Fun story, but at the same time, I don't know if it's one I'm going to republish in the future. Again, if I do, it's going to be probably paranormal romance. It will be extended and created into a completely different story in the long run. So those are all the projects I published in the past and what I will possibly be doing with them in the future, if anything. If you made it to the end of the video, feel free to leave me some golf-related emoji, because of the fact that in my mind I associate retirees with golf. Don't ask me why, because I don't like or play golf, but that's what I associate it with. My question for you today is, do you have any unpublished works or retired pen names? I am curious. In next week's video, I plan to talk about all of the stories that I want to tell in the future and what pen names they will be under. So feel free to subscribe to this channel if that's something you're interested in, and I will see you all next week for another video. Bye, Dragonlings.